Well, hey there. This video gives an overview of Atlas for Science Literacy, a little bit on where it came from, and mostly how it can be useful for science teachers. So a little background. In America, we all know how to teach facts. Science teachers know how to do that, and they know how to assess that. But how do you teach big picture conceptual understandings? I focus on those in my science teaching because those are what stick with students. We all forget the facts. They just disappear from our brain. Well, I want to focus my teaching on things that don't disappear from students' brains, things that stay with them, and the large ideas that are shown in Atlas are the kind of complex understandings that do stick with students for a long time, maybe even a lifetime. So Atlas is the best tool that I know of right now for lining those out. It comes in 2 volumes. Here's the first one. Then there's a green volume. You have to have both volumes to be able to see all of the maps that define science literacy. They are available at the National Science Digital Library, but they're not in this kind of clean form. So maybe this video, as you go to the National Digital Science Library, will help you see what the original form was like. So here's a map from Atlas. And the thing that you need to remember is that it has these grade bands. See the 4 of them? So down at the bottom are what the little ones, grades K through 2, need to learn to lay the foundation for everything that they're going to learn later on. Then come the ideas that 3rd through 5th grade teachers should add onto that foundation as students begin to build their understanding of science literacy. This is flow of matter in an ecosystem. Well, you can then see at the middle school band for this content, that's where most of the learning occurs. Developmentally appropriate for this topic is for students to learn a lot in middle school. And then in high school, there are a few ideas, that's the top band, high school, there are a few ideas added to that. So, high school teachers should be able to depend on students coming in with all of this information. Should be, I know, that's the key word. And it doesn't work all the time that way in the American system. But Atlas gives science teachers a map of the curriculum, and teachers don't have to do that themselves. They can focus instead on teaching and learning. So that's Atlas in a nutshell. Where did it come from? Well, it starts back with Science for All Americans. Back in 1985, AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, pulled together thousands of scientists to say, what do American students need to know and be able to do when they graduate? And they wrote that out in this little book. It's not big, it's not like an Atlas map. And it's in prose, and it describes the science literacy that American students should have. Well, look at it. It's not huge. Here's a target for us about where we want kids to end up when they graduate high school. And it's all described here. One thing that you might want to be curious about is the progression, and Project 2061 has to do with Halley's Comet. The idea was that the project began in 1985, and the idea of Project 2061 is when Halley's came back, American students would be learning science very differently than they were in 1985. Project 2061 is a long-term project trying to guide change in American schools. This was phase 1. Atlas was a later phase, and there's an in-between phase. Benchmarks for Science Literacy came out in the mid-90s, and Benchmarks gives, remember the grade bands from Atlas? Benchmarks gives the individual benchmarks that students should achieve as they progress through the grades. And if you think back to the Atlas maps, those little blue squares, most of those are benchmarks. Occasionally, in the development of the maps, they went back here or even another source because there was something missing on the map. But most of the blue squares on the maps are from benchmarks. Benchmarks came out, and teachers found the format kind of hard to deal with because it's divided into content areas and then the grade bands. And so if you were looking individually for what you needed to teach, it seemed to be hard to find, and Atlas then came out to pull it all together. So one other thing is the National Science Education Standards, the version that came out in the mid-90s. When they first came out, people were wondering if these two books were going to be in conflict with each other. Well, look at the cover design. Look at the colors. They actually are about 85 to 90% overlap. These two documents that have been driving the American science education system up until now don't take teachers in two different directions. So, Atlas, and as I'm recording this video, the next generation science standards are out in the second public comment period, and they will soon be out in final version. So a question is, will they replace Atlas as the conceptual driver of instruction, or will Atlas still keep its place? And I'm not sure. But I know for right now, Atlas is a great tool for teachers for thinking about the big ideas and the ideas of science literacy that their students need to have. Hope that helps.